License plates! 25 cents each at a garage sale. But what to do with them? Well, we'll figure out something. I came up with the idea of combining it with a few different things I'd been wanting to do, but mainly it was going to turn into a key rack for the front door. So I started off just by measuring it out to try and figure out what size backing I'd need, and then it went off to the scrap pile, got a piece of plywood, and cut it up to the right dimensions. I went with a piece about 3/4 of an inch thick, just so I'd have some meat, and you'll see why in a little bit. I'm going to be mounting these just like this onto the plywood and making sure that it wraps around the edges so that it's nice and clean. I marked out the thickness of the plywood around all the edges of my plates the way I wanted them laid out. That way I knew exactly where to line up my board to clamp it to the side of the table. This was going to make it easier for me to wrap the plywood nice and clean. I lined up my plate so that the line of where it was going to be bending was right at the edge of the table, and then I squeezed it between the table and the plywood, clamped it, made sure it wasn't going to move, and then just kind of slowly hit it with the hammer until it wrapped up around the board. See? Just like that. Once I had the top done, I cut in just a little bit with my tin snips so that I'd be able to wrap the top of it down so the side would be able to wrap up and over it. Just again, making sure everything's nice and clean. In order to get it to lay a little bit flatter, I did pop it off and just kind of nip the edge a little, just so that there was a little less material and it would wrap a little tighter. I ended up doing this for all 4 sides of my board, making sure to do the top and bottom first, and then wrapping the sides over top of it to cover up those folded corners. You can see here where I pinched the material just so I could hammer it up. To hold it in place, I decided to go with nice clean looking metal screws. Figured it would just continue with the industrial looking feel. You don't see it here, but I did spend a fair bit of time making sure to hammer down all the corners so that they would be nice and smooth. You've got some really sharp edges here when you start cutting into metal. But after that, just a quick coat of paint over the whole thing, make sure it was nice and white, because the next step I was going to do, I needed to make sure that I had a very plain base to it. You'd think with 3 printers at my disposal, I'd be able to get one of them to cooperate with me today. But no. So I ended up just tracing this out lightly on the screen and darkening it off. And once I had my stencil, I cut it up and taped it into place in the orientation I decided kind of looked cool on the plates. And then I started something that I thought would look really cool. And then I decided I was insane. I kept on seeing these really cool nail art and screw art type things all over Pinterest. And I thought, oh, that would be so awesome. And I thought, you know what, this would be a really cool project to do this on. And then after the first nail, I realized this is not going to be fun. This is going to take hours. But eventually, I figured out a system with some needle nose pliers. And, well, it took hours, but it looks cool now. Then it was just the simple task of getting the paper off, which kind of was simple, but kind of wasn't. In between all the letters, it was a little bit more difficult, so I ended up using a nail to kind of get underneath the paper, lift it up, pop it off, but eventually it looked really cool. Then I simply marked out where I was going to have my 3 hooks. I used a nail as a punch so that I'd have a place for my drill bit to go into. I discovered while trying to figure out a simpler way of putting all the finishing nails in that unless there's a hole in the plate already, the drill bit will just kind of skip along the top and just scratch up all the paint. I'm just making this out of whatever random material I have lying around, so the hooks were a bit long and they'll need to be cut off. That's simple. One thing that was hard to show on camera but was really noticeable when you looked at it was that the nails had, as they went through, had actually chipped the spray paint on the plates. So I went back with some white paint and just touched it up at the bottom, just so it would cover up the bright blue of the actual license plate and make the letters pop a little bit more. I also decided that this project apparently had not taken quite long enough for me to complete, and I decided I wanted to have the nail heads just a slight different color just to make it look cool and again make the letters stand out a little bit more. So I dotted paint onto each individual nail head. This took a while, and I'm not entirely sure why I did it, but it looks cool now. You can see the difference between the painted and unpainted ones. I think it looks kind of cool. With that done, I quickly just nipped off the back of the hooks where they had stuck out just a little bit too much, and put on a nice picture hook so I could hang it on the wall. These are things I probably should have done before I painted the little nail heads, because I did have to go back and paint a few of them over again, considering even with my rag I kind of chipped them off a little. And there we have it. It's actually a really simple project. It's just really time consuming, and it's dependent on which design you pick. I went for letters, so they really had to be noticeable, but I've seen ones that are done with screws and a paw print, and the more simple the design, probably the easier it's going to be for you, because you probably won't need quite so many nails. If you want to see more Wood Chip Liz videos, check out some of the links here. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss anything. I'll see you next time.